I spent 17 years building a life at Cascade Industrial Manufacturing. Not just a job, but a real connection to the place. I walked in there when I was 22, right out of community college, a junior technician with a head full of dreams and a little bit of fear. And from that day on, I just worked. Night school, certifications, countless weekends fixing obscure problems nobody else could touch. I put in the hours, the sweat, the mental gymnastics to learn every single quirk of that place. We're not just making widgets, you understand. This isn't some assembly line. We make precision components for aerospace contractors. We're talking tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. One tiny mistake? One single error? And a multi-million-dollar part is rejected. Someone loses a contract. For the last 8 years, I've been the guy they call at 3 a.m. when something goes sideways. The guy who knows which machines cough when they're about to fail, even if it's not in the manual. The guy who trained half the engineers currently on staff. Last year alone, according to HR, I saved the company about $2.3 million through process improvements and equipment modifications. That number wasn't just on my review, they framed it, put it on the wall in the main lobby, right next to the company mission statement. It was a point of pride. The facility runs 3 shifts, 6 days a week, a couple hundred people on the floor, another 60 in support. Our engineering department handles everything from initial design review to final quality certification. We are the backbone. We keep the contracts coming in and the defects going out. Then Arthur, my old boss, announced his retirement in March. Arthur had been there for 22 years. Knew the plant better than anyone. He treated his people right, understood that engineers aren't interchangeable parts. When he told me, he pulled me aside, looked me in the eye, and said he'd recommended me for his position. Said I'd earned it. He made it clear the final decision was up to corporate, but he'd done everything he could. I figured I had a real shot at department head. Not because I felt entitled, but because I'd honestly been doing half the job anyway. Arthur had been focused on the corporate politics, budget meetings, strategic planning, the stuff that required a title but not necessarily the deep technical knowledge. I handled the deep technical knowledge. Instead, corporate hired from outside. Her name was Chloe Maxwell. 43 years old. MBA from some impressive university. 0 manufacturing experience. 0 time spent actually on a production floor. Her background was management consulting and strategic operations, which, apparently, qualified her to run an engineering department full of people who'd spent their entire careers making things. The announcement email came on a Tuesday. All the usual corporate jargon about fresh perspectives and innovative leadership. Arthur sent me a private email right after. Just 2 words, sorry, kiddo. Politics won. I understood. Corporate loved external hires for management. Fresh eyes, no baggage, no loyalties to existing staff. From a certain perspective, it made sense. But it also meant putting someone with absolutely no domain expertise in charge of a highly technical operation. It felt like hiring a dentist to run a car dealership because, well, they both work with drills. Chloe started the following Monday. Her first day, she called an all-hands meeting in conference room A. She showed up 15 minutes late, wearing heels that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She stood at the front with this practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. For 45 minutes, she talked about synergy, cross-functional optimization, leveraging core competencies. I actually counted, she used the word streamline 11 times. Not once did she mention tolerances, or quality control, or the specific, unique challenges of precision manufacturing. Not once did she ask about our current projects, our ongoing concerns, or what we actually needed from leadership. When she finally finished, she asked if there were any questions. Ethan Hayes, one of my junior engineers, raised his hand. He asked how she planned to handle the recurring calibration issues with the CNC machines in the East Wing. It was a real question, a practical concern, the kind of thing that directly affects our work. Chloe blinked, smiled even wider, and said she looked forward to diving into the details with the team and that she believed in empowering her people to bring solutions to the table. Translation? I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm not going to admit that in front of everyone. Ethan looked at me, and I just shrugged. What could I do? She was the boss now. The organizational chart said so. Her first week was mostly Chloe setting up her office and scheduling one-on-ones. She decorated her space with motivational posters and abstract art. She even removed Arthur's old technical reference books from the shelves and replaced them with management philosophy bestsellers, the kind with titles about leadership, disruption, and thinking outside the box. My one-on-one was that Thursday afternoon. I walked in expecting a conversation about the department's priorities, current projects, the stuff that actually matters when you're taking over a complex operation. Instead, she spent 20 minutes telling me about her leadership philosophy, something about servant leadership and creating a culture of accountability. She drew diagrams on her whiteboard, circles, arrows, words like synergy and alignment. None of it connected to anything real. Then she asked me to describe my role in one sentence. I said, I keep this facility running when things go wrong. She wrote something in her notebook, but didn't ask any follow-up questions. Nothing about what kind of things went wrong, or how often, or what I'd learned from 17 years of problem solving. She just nodded and said she appreciated my dedication. I left that meeting knowing exactly what kind of boss she was going to be. The kind who mistakes confidence for competence. The kind who thinks managing people is the same as understanding what they do. Week 2 is when things really started getting interesting. Chloe decided she needed to establish her authority. It began with small things. She changed the meeting schedule without asking anyone's input. The weekly engineering review, traditionally held on Tuesday morning, was moved to Friday afternoon. That meant half the team couldn't attend because they were on the production floor dealing with end-of-week quality checks. I brought this up, explained the scheduling conflict, suggested we either move it back or hold 2 sessions. She said she appreciated my feedback, but the new time worked better for her calendar. Her calendar, not the team's needs. Her calendar. Then she reorganized the shared drive. 17 years of documentation, project files, technical specifications. She moved everything into a new folder structure that made sense to someone who'd never actually needed to find anything in a hurry. It took me 3 hours to locate the tolerance specs for the Vega contract because she'd filed them under historical projects instead of active clients. I mentioned this to her, politely. Suggested we discuss major changes before implementing them. She smiled that smile again, said she appreciated my feedback, but that sometimes change is uncomfortable, and we need to trust the process. Trust the process, as if finding critical documentation was some kind of personal growth exercise, instead of a job requirement. The next incident happened on a Wednesday. One of our CNC machines in the North Wing threw an error code that literally nobody recognized. Standard procedure was to call me. I'd seen every error that machine could produce over the past decade and a half. Chloe intercepted the call. Said she wanted to handle it herself. Wanted to learn the operation from the ground up. 3 hours later, the machine was still down. Production was backing up. The shift supervisor finally called me directly. I went to the North Wing and found Chloe standing in front of the machine with the operator's manual, flipping through pages like she was looking for a recipe. The error? A thermal sensor misread. Common issue when humidity changes rapidly. Takes about 4 minutes to recalibrate if you know what you're doing. I fixed it. Didn't say a word. Just fixed it and walked away. Chloe sent me an email later that afternoon. Said she appreciated my assistance, but reminded me that all technical issues should be routed through her office first. Chain of command was important. I forwarded that email to my personal account. Started building a file. Week 3, she went after the coffee machine. Now, This is important context. The engineering department had a proper espresso machine in the break room, not some cheap drip pot. An actual commercial-grade machine that Arthur had bought with departmental funds about 6 years ago. He figured if his people were going to work 60-hour weeks during crunch time, the least they deserved was decent coffee. And it worked. Morale stayed high even during the brutal seasons. People bonded over espresso, shared ideas, built the kind of informal relationships that make teams actually function. Chloe decided the machine was an unnecessary luxury. Said it created inequality because other departments didn't have one. She announced she was having it removed and replaced with a standard K-cup machine, like everyone else. Nobody said anything in the meeting, but afterward, the break room was full of people just standing there, looking at that espresso machine like it was a fallen soldier. Ethan said it best, "This is how it starts. Death by 1,000 cuts." The machine was gone by Monday. The K-cup machine arrived Tuesday. It made coffee that tasted like sadness and disappointment. Later that afternoon, one of the maintenance guys, a 30-year veteran named Gary Thompson, pulled me aside. Said he'd moved the espresso machine to a storage closet in the north wing. Said he'd keep it maintained until things changed. I told him that was probably unnecessary. He just smiled and said, "I've seen a lot of bosses come and go. The good ones stay, the bad ones don't. Either way, the coffee machine will be there when things settle down." Week 4 is when Chloe made her big move. Thursday morning, I was at my desk, reviewing the stress analysis for a landing gear component, when she stopped by. That smile was already in place. The one that said she was about to ask for something and expected total compliance. "Hey, David," she said, "I'm having my first leadership team meeting this afternoon. Directors from sales, operations, finance. Really important for making a good impression. Big opportunity to set the tone for my tenure here. I need someone to handle the coffee and refreshments." I looked up from my screen, processing what she'd just said, making sure I'd heard it correctly. "I'm in the middle of a structural analysis for the Orion contract. Due tomorrow." She tilted her head, that dismissive gesture that said my concerns were noted but irrelevant. "I'm sure it can wait a few hours. This is important. You want me to get coffee and set up the conference room? Make sure everything looks professional. Maybe pick up some pastries from that bakery downtown. First impressions matter with this group." "I'm a senior engineer," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "And I'm your department head." She said it like she was explaining something to a child. Like the hierarchy should automatically override everything else. "We all pitch in around here. That's what teamwork looks like." I just sat there for a moment. 17 years at this company. 2.3 million in documented savings last year. 3 patents with my name on them. I'd trained half the current engineering staff. Saved contracts worth tens of millions. And this woman wanted me to be her caterer. But here's the thing about working in a union shop, we've got rules. Specific rules that management tends to forget about until someone reminds them. Rules that exist precisely because people like Chloe have existed throughout history, treating skilled workers like servants. "Sure," I said, and smiled. "I'd be happy to help." Her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe. She'd expected resistance. Expected me to push back so she could assert dominance. No resistance meant she'd won. That's what she thought. Great. Meeting's at 2. Make sure everything's ready by 1:30. Got it. She walked away, looking satisfied. I waited until she was back in her office, then pulled up the union contract on my computer. Article 7, Section 4, Subsection B. I'd read this document cover to cover when I first got hired. Read it again every time contract negotiations came up. Most people skimmed the boring parts. I memorized them. The relevant section covered job classifications and duty assignments. Specifically, it addressed situations where employees were asked to perform duties outside their normal job classification. The language was clear: any employee assigned to perform courier, delivery, or service duties outside their primary job classification shall be compensated at twice the standard hourly rate for all time spent on such duties, including travel time. This provision existed because management had a habit of asking skilled workers to run errands during labor shortages in the 70s. The union negotiated it into the contract to discourage the practice, made it expensive for companies to misuse their technical staff. Nobody had invoked it in years, but it was still there. Still enforceable. Still legally binding. I printed the relevant page, highlighted the subsection. Then I started planning. If Chloe wanted coffee, she was going to get coffee. Just not the way she expected. First, I called Mark in the motor pool. Mark had been running fleet operations for over 30 years. Knew every loophole in the vehicle requisition system. Knew how to make official business look official. Need a vehicle, I told him, for a department errand. Official business. Mark didn't ask questions. That's what I liked about him. What kind of errand? He asked. Coffee run. Boss's orders. He laughed. The new one? Heard she's a piece of work. She has high standards, I replied. Mark signed out a company truck to my name. A white Ford F-150 with the Cascade logo on the door. Official vehicle. Official business. All documented in the fleet management system with timestamps and authorization codes. Next, I did some research. Chloe wanted coffee for her important meeting. She hadn't specified where to get it. She hadn't specified a budget. She hadn't specified a timeline beyond ready by 1:30. Those were her mistakes. See, there's a specialty coffee roaster about 2 hours east of Kansas City. Place called Crimson Peak Coffee. They roast their own beans on site, sourced directly from small farms in Colombia, Ethiopia, and Guatemala. Their pour-over is considered some of the best in the Midwest. I'd been there once for a friend's wedding reception. Knew they did corporate orders with full catering service. I called ahead, explained I needed premium coffee service for an executive meeting. 8 people, afternoon timing, company account. I asked about their catering options. The woman on the phone was helpful. They could prepare a selection of single-origin pour-overs, provide proper ceramic cups and equipment, and include artisan pastries from their partner bakery. Total cost for the full premium package, $480. Perfect. I gave them the company credit card number, the one Chloe had issued to me the previous week for departmental supplies. She'd handed it over casually, saying I could use it for anything work-related. Her words, not mine. Then I logged my departure time in the company system. 9:47 a.m. noted the purpose as procurement of refreshments per department head request. Everything documented. Everything official. Everything traceable. The drive east was pleasant. Late spring in Missouri, green fields, blue sky, minimal traffic on I-70. I kept the radio on an oldies station and thought about all the ways this could play out. Best case scenario? Chloe learns that treating skilled employees like servants has consequences. She gets embarrassed in front of her director colleagues. Corporate gets involved. Maybe she thinks twice before pulling something like this again. Worst case? She tries to discipline me. I file a grievance with the union, and we spend the next 6 months in arbitration while the whole company watches her explain why she sent her senior engineer to fetch coffee. Either way, I wasn't losing. Crimson Peak Coffee was everything I remembered. Small building with exposed brick, the smell of fresh roasted beans hitting you the moment you walked in. They had a display case full of pastries that looked like art, croissants, danishes, and something called a kuenemen that I'd never heard of but looked incredible. The owner, a guy named Michael Chin, came out personally to help with the order. Third-generation roaster. Knew everything about coffee the way I knew everything about stress tolerances. "You're from Cascade?" he asked while packing the thermal carafes. "We've done corporate events before, but usually it's office managers or executive assistants calling, not engineers." "Special situation," I said. He nodded like he understood. "Some bosses forget who keeps the lights on." Something like that. He showed me the selection. 3 single-origin options with detailed tasting notes: Ethiopian Yirgacheffe with floral undertones, Colombian Huilo with chocolate notes, Guatemalan Antigua with a citrus finish. Each carafe held enough for 8 servings. Professional presentation with the Crimson Peak logo. The pastries were equally impressive: butter croissants, fruit danishes, chocolate almond biscotti, all made that morning. All arranged on wooden serving boards with branded napkins. "This is a lot of effort for a coffee run," Michael said. "First impressions matter," I replied. "That's what my boss said." He gave me a knowing look. "Well, I hope she appreciates it." "I'm sure she will." The drive back took longer. Construction on I-70 added an extra 40 minutes. An accident near exit 225 added another 20. I didn't rush. Kept the thermal carafes secure in the passenger seat. Stopped once for gas and documented the receipt. Took my time at the rest stop. Bought a sandwich. Ate it slowly while watching trucks pass on the highway. I pulled into the Cascade parking lot at 3:23 p.m. Chloe's meeting had started at 2. I'd been gone for 5 hours and 36 minutes. The truck barely stopped before my phone started buzzing. 3 missed calls from Chloe. 2 from HR. 1 from Daniel Clark, the operations director. Several text messages ranging from "Where are you?" to "This is unacceptable" to "Call me immediately." I gathered the coffee supplies and walked into the building like nothing was wrong. Badged in. Nodded at security. Took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The conference room was visible through the glass walls as I approached. 8 people sitting around the table, Chloe at the head, face red, gesturing at something on her laptop screen. The directors looked uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that comes from watching someone melt down in real time. I could see empty water glasses on the table, the standard company coffee pot sitting unused in the corner. They'd been waiting for hours. I knocked on the glass door. Held up the Crimson Peak carafe like a prize. Chloe's head snapped toward me. For a second, I thought she might actually throw something. Her face went from red to purple. The directors all turned to stare. "Where have you been?" she hissed. "Getting coffee, like you asked." I opened the door and started setting up the service station in the corner. Ceramic cups arranged neatly. Pastries on the wooden serving board. 3 different single-origin options with tasting notes printed on small cards. Professional presentation. Exactly what she had asked for. The directors stared. Daniel Clark looked like he was trying not to laugh. Maria Santos from finance had her hand over her mouth. Chloe stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "That meeting request was for 1:30. It is almost 3:30. I had to start this meeting with nothing. Do you understand how embarrassing that was? Do you understand how this made me look?" "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," I said calmly. "I was fulfilling your request to obtain coffee and refreshments." The nearest facility that met professional standards for an executive meeting was located approximately 2 hours east of here. "I prioritized quality, as you requested." Her eyes narrowed. "Quality? You could have gone to the Starbucks 5 minutes away. You said you wanted to make a good impression. You said first impressions matter. I assumed that meant you wanted the best available option, not the most convenient one." Maria Santos from finance spoke up from her seat. Actually, these pastries are excellent. Where did you say this place was? Crimson Peak Coffee, I replied. About 2 hours east. They source directly from small farms. Roast everything on site. Chloe cut in. This is not relevant to the discussion. Daniel Clark leaned back in his chair. I don't know, Chloe. Seems pretty relevant to me. You asked him to get coffee. He got coffee. Exceptional coffee, from the looks of it. This is insubordination. You deliberately sabotaged my meeting. I set down the last plate, arranged the napkins, made sure everything was perfectly positioned. Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the printed union contract page. Actually, I followed your instructions exactly. However, I do want to make you aware of Article 7, Section 4, Subsection B of our collective bargaining agreement. It states that any employee assigned courier or service duties outside their primary job classification is entitled to compensation at twice the standard hourly rate, including travel time. I handed her the paper. She looked at it like I'd handed her a live snake. Didn't take it, just stared. My standard hourly rate is $64. I was performing courier duties for 5 hours and 36 minutes. That's $358 at base rate, or $716 at the contractual double time rate. Additionally, I incurred $480 in refreshment costs, which I charged to the departmental account as authorized by you. The room was silent. Daniel Clark had stopped pretending not to laugh and was openly grinning. Maria Santos was taking notes. You charged $700 for coffee? Chloe's voice had gone shrill. Higher than professional. The kind of voice that makes people look away out of second-hand embarrassment. I obtained premium catering services for an executive meeting as instructed. I followed proper procurement procedures and documented all expenses. I also ensured that my compensation for performing non-engineering duties was handled according to our legally binding union contract. I paused. Let the silence build. Would you like me to invoice HR directly, or should I submit through the normal timesheet process? Chloe looked at the other directors. They looked away. Nobody wanted to be associated with this. This is ridiculous. You're not getting double time for a coffee run. That's fine, I said. We can address it through the grievance process. I'm sure the union steward would be interested in reviewing a case where management explicitly assigned courier duties to a classified engineer and then refused contractual compensation. Daniel Clark spoke up. Chloe, can we take a 5-minute break? I think we should let this get sorted out privately. She nodded stiffly. The directors filed out. A few of them grabbed pastries on the way. One commented quietly that the croissants looked amazing. Another poured himself a cup of the Ethiopian and raised his eyebrows appreciatively. Maria stopped to examine the coffee selection. Crimson Peak Coffee. Nice choice. These guys are excellent. I've been to their tasting room. Thanks, I said. Figured if I was making the trip, might as well do it right. Chloe and I were alone now. She stood behind her chair, gripping the back like she needed something to hold on to. You think you're clever? I think I followed instructions. You deliberately made me look foolish in front of my peers. You asked a senior engineer to fetch coffee. The foolishness was built into the request. I just provided documentation. Her jaw tightened. This isn't over. The grievance goes through, regardless. That's $716 you owe me. I walked out before she could respond. Thomas Miller, the union steward, found me at my desk 20 minutes later. He'd been with Cascade almost as long as I had. Knew the contract as well as anyone. Heard you had an interesting afternoon. News travels fast. He sat on the corner of my desk. Mark called me. Said you requisitioned a truck for a coffee run and came back 4 hours later with gourmet espresso. Said it was the best use of company resources he'd seen in years. 5 hours and 36 minutes, I corrected. Thomas grinned. Article 7, Section 4, Subsection B. You know your contract. That provision hasn't been invoked since 1989. Guy named Pete Morales got sent to pick up dry cleaning for his supervisor. Billed 8 hours of double time because he drove to a cleaner in St. Louis instead of using the one across the street. Management never assigned personal errands to union members again. Legend. Thomas handed me a form. File this. I'll make sure it gets processed correctly. Also, between us, about 6 other people in the department have approached me about similar incidents. Chloe's been using engineers as personal assistants since she got here. Having people pick up her lunch, run documents to other buildings. One guy got sent to pick up her dry cleaning 3 times in 2 weeks. You're just the first one to fight back. I filled out the form, signed it, dated it, and handed it back. She's going to escalate this, probably. He shrugged. Corporate doesn't like union grievances. Bad for metrics, bad for executive reviews. The last department head who racked up multiple grievances got quietly transferred to a facility in Nevada in July without air conditioning. The next few weeks were a lesson in Cold War dynamics. Chloe didn't speak to me directly. Everything came through email, meticulously worded and CC'd to HR. She requested status updates on projects that didn't need updates. Asked for documentation on procedures I'd been performing successfully for years. Scheduled performance check-ins with vague agendas and ominous subject lines. The first check-in was the Monday after the coffee incident. She had a list of concerns: my attitude, my communication style, my resistance to change. She read them off like she was presenting evidence at a trial. I sat there and let her finish. Then I asked if she had any concerns about my actual work product, the quality of my engineering, the accuracy of my analyses, the effectiveness of my solutions. She paused, said she was focused on behavioral issues at this time. I told her I'd take her feedback under advisement, asked if there was anything else. She said no. I left. That afternoon, I sent her an email summarizing our conversation. CC'd HR, noted that no performance concerns related to engineering quality had been raised. Asked her to confirm the summary was accurate. She never responded, but she also never brought up that meeting again. I responded to everything she sent me on time, in writing, with excessive detail. She wanted a status update on the Orion contract? A 14-page report with appendices covering stress analysis methodology, tolerance specifications, supplier communications, and a timeline showing I was ahead of schedule. She wanted documentation on the calibration process for the East Wing? A complete procedural manual, plus photographs, plus comparison analysis with industry standards showing our process exceeded baseline requirements by 18%. Every email ended the same way: please let me know if you need any additional information. I'm happy to provide clarification. Ethan started calling it the bureaucratic Aikido approach. Make compliance into a weapon. Meanwhile, Chloe was struggling with the actual job. First disaster, she approved a vendor change for precision fasteners without consulting anyone. Saved 12% on unit costs. Also resulted in 4 rejected batches because the new fasteners didn't meet aerospace certification requirements. Cost us $90,000 in rework and delayed delivery penalties. Second disaster, she restructured the project management workflow to improve efficiency. Added 3 new approval layers. Increased average project timelines by 11%. Third disaster, she implemented a new performance metric system based on something from a management seminar. Engineers started getting evaluated on criteria that had nothing to do with engineering quality. 2 junior engineers started updating their resumes. One of them, a talented kid named Liam, who'd been with us 3 years, actually quit. Took a job with a competitor. We lost 2 years of training investment because Chloe wanted to measure synergy. Fourth disaster, she scheduled a critical client presentation without checking the engineering team's availability. I was in the middle of a compliance audit. Ethan was handling a machine failure in the East Wing. The presentation happened with no technical staff present. The client asked questions nobody could answer. They walked away with serious concerns about our capabilities. And through all of it, I just kept doing my job, quietly, effectively, documenting everything. The grievance hearing happened 6 weeks after the coffee incident. Standard process. Me, Thomas, Chloe, an HR representative named Sarah Jenkins, and a neutral arbitrator from the Union Management Committee. We met in conference room B at 9 in the morning. Same room where Chloe had announced all her changes. Felt appropriate. The arbitrator was a guy named Robert Davies, a retired labor lawyer who'd done hundreds of these hearings over the years. Had a reputation for being fair but thorough. Chloe's argument was predictable. I had deliberately misinterpreted her request. A reasonable person would have understood she meant local coffee, not a 4-hour road trip. My actions constituted insubordination and malicious compliance. She brought documentation, emails showing I'd been a difficult employee, performance concerns she'd noted over the previous weeks, a written statement arguing that my behavior was part of a pattern of resistance to her leadership. She even had a timeline showing how long it should have taken to get coffee from nearby vendors. Robert reviewed everything carefully, took notes, asked clarifying questions about the emails. My counterargument was simpler. She assigned a classified engineer to perform courier duties. The contract specifies compensation rates for such assignments. The distance traveled was a direct result of her failure to provide specific parameters. I followed her instructions exactly as given. I brought documentation, too, the union contract with the relevant section highlighted, the fleet requisition form showing official authorization, the credit card receipt showing proper procurement procedures, the time log showing my departure and return times, plus testimonials from 3 coworkers about similar errand requests they'd received. Thomas presented the union's position, cited precedent from the 1989 Pete Morales case, quoted the exact contract language, pointed out that the provision existed specifically to prevent this kind of situation. Robert reviewed everything, asked clarifying questions. Then he turned to Chloe. Ms. Maxwell, did you provide Mr. with specific instructions regarding where to obtain the coffee? I said to get coffee and pastries, but no specific vendor, no location, no budget constraints. I expected him to use common sense. The arbitrator nodded, made a note, turned to me. Mr. Graham, did you have any reason to believe Mrs. Maxwell intended for you to spend 5 hours on this errand? She said it was an important meeting with directors. She emphasized making a good impression. She said, first impressions matter. I obtained what I judged to be the highest quality option available given those parameters. Another note. The arbitrator looked at both of us. The contract language is clear. Courier duties performed by classified personnel are compensable at double time rates. The assignment was made without parameters. The employee followed the assignment as given. The grievance is sustained. The award is $716 to be processed through standard payroll within 2 pay periods. Chloe's face went white. Sarah from HR was already making notes. I would also recommend, Robert continued, that department management establish clear protocols for any future non-standard duty assignments to avoid similar disputes. Meeting adjourned. Thomas shook my hand outside the conference room. First sustained Article 7 grievance in 34 years. You're officially a legend. The fallout came faster than expected. Daniel Clark, the operations director who'd been in that conference room during the coffee incident, mentioned the situation during an executive meeting the following week. He described what he'd seen, the shouting, the contract dispute, the $700 coffee service, the way the directors had quietly enjoyed the excellent pastries while watching their colleague implode. Corporate launched a quiet review of Chloe's department management. They found the fastener disaster, the project delays, the morale issues, the grievance, 6 complaints from other engineers about being used as personal assistants, Liam's resignation letter citing toxic management. 2 months after the arbitration, Chloe announced she was leaving Cascade to pursue other opportunities. Standard corporate language, but everyone knew what it meant. She'd been given the choice to resign gracefully or be managed out messily. Her last day was a Friday. She packed her office without saying goodbye to anyone. I watched her carry a box to her car around 4:30. She didn't look back. The following Monday felt different. Lighter. People actually smiled in the hallways. Someone brought donuts to the morning meeting. Ethan made a joke about servant leadership and nobody flinched. The interim department head was Eleanor Vance. 11 years with Cascade, worked her way up from quality control. Actually knew what a tolerance specification was. Actually understood why certain things mattered. First thing she did was call a department meeting. Not to talk about synergy or optimization, but just to ask what was broken and what we needed to fix it. People actually spoke up: the meeting schedule, the shared drive organization, the performance metrics, the approval layers. 2 hours later, we had a priority list and a plan. Second thing she did was have Gary bring the espresso machine back from the storage closet in the north wing. "Welcome back," she said when we rolled it into place. Gary made the first cup. Said it still worked perfectly. Said he'd been maintaining it every week, just in case. Third thing Eleanor did was reach out to Liam, the junior engineer who'd quit. Asked if he'd consider coming back. Told him things had changed. He said he'd think about it. 3 months later, Eleanor called me into her office. Corporate wants to make this permanent. Department head position. They're also adding a deputy role for technical oversight. I recommended you. Unanimous board approval. 15% raise. Reserved parking spot. I accept. She slid a paper across the desk. One condition. The coffee runs go through proper procurement channels. No more 4-hour road trips. Deal. The story got even better. That $90,000 figure for Chloe's fastener disaster? It was conservative. One of our aerospace clients, a major defense contractor I can't name, launched a full supply chain audit after the incident. Standard procedure when a quality issue gets flagged. Usually, it's a formality. This time, it wasn't. The audit revealed that Chloe had approved 3 other vendor changes during her brief tenure. All without proper engineering review. All to save money on unit costs. 2 of them created potential compliance issues with FAA certification standards. Nothing had failed yet. Nothing had caused an accident. But the potential was there. And in aerospace, potential is enough. The defense contractor paused their contract pending a full remediation review. That contract was worth $4.2 million annually. The remediation process took 3 months and cost another $600,000 in consultant fees, additional testing, and expedited recertification. Total damage from Chloe's cost-cutting initiatives? Approximately $1.8 million. Ethan found her on LinkedIn last month. She's at a consulting firm in Nashville now. Title: Strategic Operations Advisor. She posted an article about servant leadership and empowering teams through trust. Ethan screenshot it and sent it to the group chat. 3 laughing emojis. The consulting firm called Cascade for a reference about 8 months after she started there. HR forwarded the call to Daniel Clark. His response apparently included phrases like significant compliance concerns and would not recommend for roles requiring technical judgment. Chloe lasted another 4 months at the consulting firm. Her LinkedIn now says she's a freelance strategic advisor. Meanwhile, Eleanor got promoted to VP of Operations. She asked me to take over as full department head. I said yes. Another raise. Corner office. First thing I did was order a second espresso machine for the quality control team. They'd been jealous of ours for years. Second thing I did was reinstate the Tuesday morning engineering review. Full attendance, actual technical discussions. No buzzwords allowed. Third thing I did was call Crimson Peak Coffee and set up a monthly delivery. Premium beans. Company expense. Eleanor approved it without hesitation. Said it was a morale investment. Mark from the motor pool stopped by last week. Said he was retiring at the end of the year. 32 years running fleet operations. Asked if I remembered the coffee. How could I forget? He grinned. Best requisition I ever approved. Still tell that story at family dinners. Eleanor asked me to draft new guidelines for non-standard duty assignments. Simple policy: if a task falls outside an employee's job classification, it requires written authorization with specific parameters, budget limitations, and expected completion time. No ambiguity. No games. She approved it the same day. Put it in the employee handbook. Last Tuesday, I got a call from Michael Chin, the owner of Crimson Peak Coffee. He said he'd been telling the story of the Cascade Coffee run for months. His customers loved it. Turns out one of those customers was a regional business reporter for a Kansas City newspaper. She tracked me down through the company, asked if I'd do an interview about workplace dynamics and union contracts. The article ran last Sunday, the $716 coffee run, how one engineer used a union contract to push back against a bad boss. They interviewed me, Thomas Miller, and Michael Chin. Even got a quote from Daniel Clark about what he witnessed in that conference room. The reporter did her research, found the Pete Morales precedent from 1989, talked to labor lawyers about the enforceability of union contracts, made it into a bigger story about workplace dignity and knowing your rights. The article got picked up by a few national outlets. Business Insider ran a summary. A labor rights blog did a follow-up piece. I started getting emails from engineers at other companies asking for advice on their own situations. I sent them all copies of their union contracts with the relevant sections highlighted. Told them to document everything. Ethan framed a copy of the article and hung it in the break room, right next to the espresso machine. Someone added a sticky note underneath that said, "First impressions matter." Crimson Peak Coffee sent us a care package last week, 3 pounds of their best beans, a handwritten note from Michael, and a coffee mug that says, "First impressions matter." Michael wrote that our story had brought them more business than any advertising campaign ever had. Said they were naming a blend after the incident. Called it the grievance roast. I put the mug on my desk. Use it every morning. It's amazing, isn't it, what a simple coffee run can turn into? What would you have done in my shoes?